Can you imagine the scene? A vast sea of people, thousands upon thousands, their faces etched with hunger and fatigue. The sun is beginning to set, casting long shadows across the dusty landscape. There are over 5,000 men, not even counting the women and children. They had followed Jesus, drawn by his words, by the hope he offered, but now, a practical problem loomed. They were far from any town, and the day was nearly over. Where could they possibly find enough food for such a crowd? The disciples, practical and worried, came to Jesus. They saw the impossibility of the situation. Send the crowds away, they suggested, so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food. Their solution was logical, based on what they could see, on the limited resources they had. But Jesus had a different perspective. He saw not a problem but an opportunity for God's power to be revealed. He turned to his disciples and said something that must have sounded astounding. They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. Imagine their confusion. Them feed this enormous crowd. They did a quick inventory. All they could find was a young boy willing to share his small meal. 5 simple barley loaves and 2 small fish. It was almost laughable. What was that among so many? It was nothing, a drop in the ocean. In our own lives, don't we often feel the same? We look at the challenges before us, a broken relationship, a daunting project, a deep personal need, and we look at our own resources, our strength, our money, our talent, and it feels like 5 loaves and 2 fish. It feels hopelessly inadequate. We feel small, and the problem feels immense. But here is where the story turns. Jesus didn't dismiss the boy's small offering. He didn't despair at the lack of resources. Instead, he took what was offered. He took that meager lunch, looked up to heaven, and gave thanks. He blessed it. In that moment of blessing, the ordinary was about to become extraordinary. The impossible was about to become possible. What seems too little in your hands can become more than enough in God's. This is a crucial lesson. God doesn't ask for what we don't have. He asks for what we do have, no matter how small it seems. He asks for our willingness, our trust, our 5 loaves and 2 fish. Then, Jesus instructed the disciples to have the people sit down in groups, an act of faith and order in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. He broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people, and then the miracle unfolded. As the bread was passed, it didn't run out. As the fish was shared, there was always more. Hands that were empty were suddenly full. The food just kept coming. There was no grand explosion, just a quiet, continuous, and overwhelming provision. The looks of hunger turned to looks of astonishment, then to joy. Smiles spread across faces as people ate their fill. The murmur of worried whispers transformed into the happy chatter of a shared meal. This wasn't just about feeding hungry stomachs. It was about feeding hungry souls. It was a demonstration that with God, our limitations are not the final word. He can take our small acts of faith, our humble offerings, and multiply them in ways we could never imagine. He can bring abundance out of scarcity. He can bring hope out of despair. It's a reminder that our part is to give what we have, and God's part is to do the rest. And after everyone had eaten and was completely satisfied, Jesus gave one final instruction. Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. The disciples went through the crowd and collected the leftovers. And how much was there? Not just a few crumbs. They filled 12 baskets with the broken pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. 12 baskets. They started with barely enough for one boy and ended with more leftovers than they had food to begin with. This wasn't just enough. It was more than enough. This is the nature of God's provision. It is not stingy or just barely sufficient. It is abundant, overflowing, and extravagant. God multiplies what you give with faith. So, what are the 5 loaves and 2 fish in your life? What is that small thing you're holding on to, thinking it's not enough? Your time, your talent, a kind word, a small act of service. I encourage you today to offer it to God. Place it in His hands, trust Him with it, and watch what He does. You might just be surprised to see Him multiply it in ways that not only meet the need but leave you with baskets full of blessings. Remember to always be kind. Don't forget to subscribe to Stories of Faith 2025 and ring that notification bell. See you in the next video.